He's Dave and I'm Dallas, and we have opinions on just about everything. Sometimes they're on point, and sometimes they go down better with a glass of wine. Join us. This is the Wine and Podcast.
Welcome back, everybody, to Wine and, the show where we pair wine with movies, TV, music, books, comics, and maybe one day we'll pair it with, I don't know, cats. Movie cats. You want to know why the Alien movies haven't achieved the glory of the first two ever since? They're all missing the cat, Jonesy, played by four different cats in the original Alien movie, and Kitty does make a brief but weirdly memorable reappearance in the sequel, and was so popular that he even got his own graphic novel, Jonesy: 9 Lives on the Nostromo by Rory Lucy. And Jonesy was placed as one of the top 15 movie cats of all time by Megan Cook of Insider. So, movie cats, I want to reinvent this whole show to be a wine and cat pairing show. God damn it, that sounds amazing. We can all go home. I think I'm just going to restart this show after this. We'll make it a wine and cat thing. All right. Oh, and I should also point out, by the way, folks, Sigourney Weaver's Ripley is a childless cat lady. Okay,
that's right.
One of the most popular and kick-ass heroines in American cinematic history. The boomers loved her, and she's a childless cat lady. Just saying. That does admittedly change in Alien Resurrection when she becomes a kind of mom, a thing that's kind of revisited in this latest Alien Romulus. We're going to get to that in just a moment. But first, if you like what you hear today, please make sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. It does help this podcast grow, reach new listeners, create a hive mind, see what I did there, given today's subject matter. And if you love us, then please leave a 5-star review. If you don't love us, send us an email. Tell us why you don't love us. It's because we're not a wine and cat pairing show, isn't it? I know. Send that angry, imploring email to wine. The letter N is in newt, P-O-D, as in the pod that facehuggers are birthed from. winenpod@gmail.com. We are also on Substack. Substack subscribers are the first to know when new episodes drop, can interact with us, gain access to bonus pairings, articles, interactive polls, pairing directories, which are coming very soon, and more. We're working on it, but there will definitely be more. That is wineand.substack.com. We would love to see and hear from you there. And since you're already doom scrolling as you listen to this, go ahead and find us on all the socials under our profile name, Wine and Pod. That is the full and, A-N-D, Wine, A-N-D, P-O-D, Wine and Pod. That is our handle. We are on IG Threads, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. And to wrap this up, know that most of the time we discuss things we love, though sometimes we will dissect something that we hate. I'm pretty sure the first thing of that nature that we're going to tackle is the movie Southland Tales. But whatever it is you love, whatever it is you hate, there is a wine that pairs with that. All right. Today, everybody, we have a very special guest in the house with us, Bryant Dillon. Woo! No relation to Matt Dillon, who is more famous and more important than Bryant. And... well, no, not Steve Dillon, the artist on John Constantine, Hellblazer, and Preacher.
That's right.
That is also a Dillon that is more famous and important.
Yes.
No, not AJ Dillon, not the Green Bay Packers guy. He is also more important and famous and rich than Bryant. But okay, focus, people. The one who is with us here today, Bryant, has been many things, including a writer, artist, director, and actor. His writing credits include Fanbase Press's 2 first graphic novels, Something Animal and Identity Theft. Woo! California Cold Blood Books, The Odds, the audio drama adaptation, contributions to McFarlane's The Comics of Joss Whedon, and more. He also served as an actor, writer, and executive producer on the fan-produced audio drama The Katniss Chronicles. Bryant Dillon is perhaps, though, most importantly, president and co-founder, alongside wife Barbara Dillon, who, yes, is more famous and important than Bryant. Hush!
That's true.
He is president and co-founder of Fanbase Press, the GLAAD Media Award-winning and Eisner and Harvey Awards-nominated comic book publisher and geek culture website. Bryant hosts his own weekly podcast, the Fanbase Weekly, which can be found, much like ours, wherever fine podcasts are cast, and on fanbasepress.com. Now, fan base is currently gearing up to celebrate its 15th anniversary, if that is correct, Bryant.
That's crazy.
Next year, 15.
Next year. So gearing up.
Yep.
Yeah.
Gearing up to celebrate its 15th anniversary, and they are doing so by launching their very first Kickstarter to fund a deluxe hardcover edition of Jordan Hart and Bruno, I'm totally going to fuck this up, Chirolu's.
That's right. You got it.
All right. Bruno Chirolu, who, by the way, did this graphic novel El Borde, which I have been waiting for the English language adaptation to drop for a while now. I have pre-ordered it twice, and that listing was canceled twice. And I was like, God damn it, I want the English language edition of this thing. It looks amazing. So Jordan Hart and Bruno Chirolu's Ripple Effect, which follows the adventures of a superhero whose invincibility is offset by an acute case of type 1 diabetes that must be monitored and treated daily. Nominated for the biggest awards in comics, this gripping and inspirational story about living with an invisible illness is inspired by Hart's own lived experience with thrombophilia, an incurable blood clotting disease. Now, we will have a link to that Kickstarter down below for all to click. And Bryant, my man, welcome to Wine and. How you doing today?
What's up, Brian?
I'm so excited to be here. Big fan. Been listening to the latest episodes, and just really excited to come here and talk Alien with both of you.
Yes.
Well, thank you. We enjoy having you, my friend. And I do believe this is your suggestion.
Yes.
Right?
Correct.
Yeah.
I'm an Alien super fan, so I come with the baggage.
Okay, you're ranking this entire series. What's number one on that list?
Personal preference or
personal preference.
Personal preference.
I'm going to put Alien 3 at the top because that's the kind of fan.
All right, smart man, very smart man.
Dallas, is that tie or is that your top or just high? Alien 3.
That's my top. That's my top.
That's your top. We are all three Alien 3 tops.
That is a very unusual group.
That is very unusual.
I don't know how we all found each other.
I mean, it could be generational, like that thing
Maybe
where we saw it in the theater, and it was our first Alien in the theater, right?
That's actually very true, yeah.
Very true. Maybe there are probably people of our generation that just didn't see it in the theater, and so it didn't have that same effect. You know what I mean? Like just watching it later because you missed it for whatever reason. Maybe you were slightly too young. Maybe you just weren't. You're like, I don't know what my parents did not let me watch rated R movies until I was 18. Like straight up, they did not let me. So the only reason I knew Alien 3 existed and what Alien and Aliens was by then is my aunts and uncles did not give a shit. And when we stayed with them, they had like RoboCop, the Alien franchise, Predator, you name it, and I was just like, ooh, and watched them all. Yeah. So, all right. So we are all Alien 3 people. That's going to be fascinating to check out here in just a moment. But first, what we always like to do here at the beginning now of every episode is, guys, what are we drinking? What are we drinking with this brand new Alien movie, Alien Romulus? I'll tell you what, Bryant, we're going to go first just so you can see what we say and whatnot. I feel like that's more fair than just throwing you on the spot.
Why not?
So I'm going to go. I'll go first because I think Dallas went first on the last one.
Yeah, go.
That we did. So I did, this latest Alien Romulus, and we're going to talk, of course, much more in detail about this in just a moment, but it is a thrill ride. There is no question about that. It's almost a thrill ride to a fault, which might be one of the criticisms where you're just sort of like, it's one of those things where it just keeps going and it's so thrilling and so edge of your seat for so long that you're kind of just like, stop.
Right.
Just like, stop.
Like
make it stop. Already. Make it stop.
Yeah. Martin Scorsese would call it a theme park ride.
A theme park ride. Oh, 100%. 100%. So it's intense. We're going to put it that way. So when I came out of that theater, I was like, I need an intense wine with this. Now, I could have gone the opposite way. I could have done a contrast for what the movie is. Like, it's so intense. I want something chill. I want something that's simple and easy, dialed down. And maybe that's what I wanted to do. But you know what? No, I wanted to go. I was all in. I'm doubling down on the intensity. And I'm like, I'm matching what's on that screen.
Good man.
This is Yes. So, and on top of that, Fede Alvarez and his longtime co-writer who co-wrote this with him as well, Rodo Sayagues, I want to say.
Sayagues.
I have it written down. When we get to the history, I will say his name properly. But they are both Uruguayan filmmakers.
Mm-hmm.
So, earlier we had a Godzilla episode where we compared two different Godzillas from two different cultures, one American, one Japanese, and kind of saw the difference in what you could do. And at the time, I did this grape called Tannat, which is one of the great, dark, intense, age-worthy reds of the world. That it's often, you don't see it that often on its own. There's only a couple places. There's Madiran in France, Paso Robles here in the States, and I believe Virginia, weirdly, has picked it up as like a major grape. It just grows really well there. But for the most part, you don't see it that often. But the country of real note with Tannat these days is Uruguay. It is the country's national grape. It does so well down there.
Wow.
And for the Godzilla episode, I did a Paso Robles Tannat with a Madiran, French Tannat. So this time, in honor of the filmmakers, I am doing an Uruguayan Tannat, a reserve Uruguayan Tannat. And this is a Reserva. In Uruguay, you can kind of get Tannat in two different styles. There are places that grow it a little friendlier, a little easier going, a little more easy drinking. And that's called the new style. And then there's a traditional or classic style, which is very much like the old world, like heavy, age-worthy. You oak the shit out of it and it's still rough. And it's like you got to keep it in the bottle for a little while. And I found a reserve classic style from Uruguay because something intense to go with this. And honestly, drink it young because that's the point. Don't let it mellow. That defeats the purpose. You got to drink it now. This is a 2020 reserve Tannat from Uruguay, from Marechal Vineyards. And that is my pairing with Alien Romulus because, man, I think the intensity and just the concentration and the power of the wine, it matches this film tit for tat, and that was my baby. So Dallas, what do you got?
All right, so coming out of this film, actually I knew the varietal I wanted before I even watched the film. I wanted something that was ripe because I think this film is ripe, and it does kind of exist in its own category. As a departure, more or less, from everything else going on in the alien world. It is... I didn't think this film was necessarily too acute in either direction. It was kind of a great core alien kind of tale. One sort of note, I suppose, I did pick up on and want to mirror is the fact that it has a very long and round finish. And I say that because I almost thought this film was 3 hours long because it felt so.
It is 2 hours long, like solid 2 hours long.
But that's why it felt so much longer because of what you were saying earlier. It's sort of like a teasing and an edging. For those of you in the BDSM community, you're getting your rocks off now at someone mentioning that on the wine and pairing podcast. But it really is sort of an edge of your seat, pun intended. And it ended up feeling so much longer and so much denser than it actually was. So I knew I wanted a Pinotage. And for those of you who don't know, yeah, right. And for those of you who don't know, the Pinotage is kind of the darling of South Africa at the moment. It generally, you can pick them up for great deals. It is,
people don't like it, so they don't sell it too expensive.
It's crazy to me because this
I
one in
love
particular,
it. I love it.
It's got a nice ripe kind of plum core to it, and there's the deep cherry notes on the back end. You get some of that almost acidic fig in there. It's well balanced. It's juicy. You get some raspberry. There's even, I think the note that most people have an issue with is there's a leathery thing on the palate.
Burnt rubber is what I call it.
Yeah, for me it's like an embossed leather thing. And
a varnishy burnt rubber embossed leather. There's something that you're like, should this be in food? I'm not
Exactly.
sure if
Right.
that's okay. Right.
But it's fantastic. So I went with the Klein Drachen Mountain Vineyards Pinotage 2022. It is so good and so drinkable and quaffable, as we like to say. And honestly, we finished this bottle in like 2 or 3 glasses.
Yeah.
It's a problem. It's actually a problem. And to the point that I will probably be getting quite a few more of these. And with the Alien film, it's relit the fire. You know what I mean? And I think it's kind of relit the fire for the franchise too, because walking away from this film, I was very much like, okay, that was its own thing. It's whetted my appetite for more in the actual kind of original vein of the story. And so yeah, it's the Klein Drachen Mountain Vineyards Pinotage.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
All right. Bryant, what are you thinking?
Brian.
What are you drinking with this?
I'm definitely going to tell you. But first off, I have to say, Dave, that "Drink 'em Young" could potentially be a subtitle for this film, given the cast.
Yes, good.
Indeed.
Yes, it could.
Really
So
good.
I do think that goes to a deeper level.
They're really good.
I was going to, stick with the wine route, but then Dave, you suggested in your email that we can go beyond that. It could be non-alcoholic, and there's something about this film that just spoke to me to a certain drink that I have history with in my life. I'm going to well, listen here. I'll give you a little practical effects like Fede Alvarez here. Little opening like a cryo tube. This is low carb Monster energy drink.
That's hilarious.
It will eat through your floors. It'll eat through your stomach.
Yeah.
It'll definitely give you a rush. Maybe leave you hanging towards the end. I might not make all the way through the runtime.
Those are the worst puns ever.
Yes, exactly. This is the. I mean, in all honesty, this is something that I still come back to because I grew addicted to it. And as
because you're a child, admit it.
What is appropriate, I think, also is like this capitalist society has driven me to a point of exhaustion where we're all popping pills and shooting things into our veins and pouring things inside ourselves to keep going. And boy, does this film
and
and
spending the little money we have on doing so, and putting it back into the pockets of the people that are driving us into the ground.
Knowingly, that the lives are being shed or the years are being shed off our lives. This can't be good for me, but I'm going to put it in my body for the gain right now. And so, that did speak to me with the characters in this movie, the fate, the desperation, and here I am once again pouring poison into my body.
Welcome to the club. Welcome to the party, my friend. Welcome to the party.
Extreme drinks all across the board. We got your Uruguayan Tannat, we got the South African Pinotage, and we've got the low carb Monster Energy. So low sugar. Do they call it low carb or low sugar?
We want to save what we can. It just says low carb. It's
low carb. So I'm assuming that has to mean low sugar. What else?
Yeah,
I mean, you don't want to know what else might have been in there in the first place, right?
Yeah.
What corn byproduct that wasn't just sugar or whatever.
Well, and maybe I will argue, because I do believe this, honestly. I think the Monster brand is missing out on a marketing opportunity. I could do it right here for you. Alien Romulus
100%.
brought to you by Monster Energy Drink.
Every monster movie of any kind. The next kaiju movie, right? They should be doing that. The Alien, the
Freddy, Jason, all
any
of them,
movie with a monster.
Special
and
issue
have a
can
monster
wraps.
special
I mean,
thing.
they are missing out. They are missing out on so much marketing.
Yes, they are. All right, guys. Well, that is what we're drinking. We'll circle back to the drinks one last time at the end once we talk about the movie. And before we start talking about the movie, in terms of like what our personal histories with the franchise are, when we saw it, and then talking more in depth, let's briefly touch on the history of how this movie got made. There's not too much here. This won't take too long because, this movie just came out. So the stories aren't really out there yet. You know what I mean? Like the good behind the scenes stories, like those haven't leaked yet. We got to give it some time before we start hearing about, if anything, actually, if this was it barely got made, but it does still have a little bit of a curious story here. So aliens, I keep wanting to call it plural. Alien Romulus is the 7th feature film in the Alien franchise that began with Ridley Scott's 1979 Alien, continued into James Cameron's Aliens, David Fincher's Alien 3, or Alien Cubed, as the 90s kids love to call it, Jean-Pierre Junet's Alien Resurrection. Then there were 2 Alien versus Predator movies after that, but I don't think they're considered canon. And for all intents and purposes, I'm not really gonna call them part of the main franchise. Are they Alien movies? Yes, but we're gonna call this, and I think the media is calling this the 7th feature film in the Aliens franchise. So we're gonna set those 2 aside. They exist. Everyone know they exist. The first one is a lot of fun. The second one ain't even that, so do with that what you will. At least that's my opinion on the subject. And we might, again, circle back to all of these as we keep talking. But that was then followed by Ridley's return to the franchise with Prometheus and then Alien Covenant. Then there is this interquel film, being a film that acts as both a prequel and a sequel, bridging the gap between the two or more, between 2 or more entries in a series. And that is this Alien Romulus. So directed and co-written by Fede Alvarez of Evil Dead, the remake of Evil Dead and Don't Breathe fame, alongside longtime co-writer, here we go, Rodo Sayagues. There we go. A little bit better. I think I got one syllable in there wrong the first time. And they co-wrote Evil Dead. They co-wrote Don't Breathe. Rodo, in fact, directed Don't Breathe 2. They kind of switched off. And he took over for that one. And this film, Alien Romulus, stars Kaylee Spaney, David Johnson, Archie Renault, Isabella Merced, Spike Fearn, and Aileen Wu. After the success of director Fede Alvarez's Don't Breathe in 2016, he had a meeting with Ridley Scott's production company, Scott Free, just before they were about to begin production on 2017's Alien Covenant. So Alvarez happened to mention things he would like to see in an Alien film and pitched some story ideas. So days before the release of Covenant, Ridley went on record as saying there would be a 3rd and final entry to the current trilogy, with Covenant being followed by a movie tentatively titled Aliens Awakening. Unfortunately, Covenant disappointed at the box office, and it did okay. It just disappointed, right? It kind of broke even, but it did less than Prometheus. Right, so that was kind of a warning sign. So in December 2017, a user claiming to be a crew member on Covenant claimed on the Blu-ray.com forums that 20th Century had halted pre-production on Awakening shortly after Covenant hit theaters. He said, quote, "So the original plan of pumping out another quickly has definitely changed with no immediate plans for anything." So a couple of years later, Disney, of course, purchased 20th Century Fox, absorbing the Aliens and Predator franchises. And while there was no direct mention of Aliens Awakening, the industry did assume that it definitely succumbed to the mini projects the Mouse House axed as they steered that ship into a very uncertain future. However, in late 2021, Ridley remembered Federez's pitch and called him up, asking if he was still interested in writing and directing it. I could not find any direct reason for Ridley's sudden desire to pursue this project, but the timing of this places it right around the time the new Predator movie, Prey, wrapped filming in Calgary, Canada. So likely, Disney was simply ramping up their plans for both franchises. So on March 4th, 2022, Federez's Alien project was announced in the trades, stating that 20th Century picked up the project, quote, purely off the strength of Fede's pitch. And this is a quote from Division President Steve Asbell. "It was just a really good story with a bunch of characters you haven't seen before," he said. Now, at the time, the film was slated to debut on Hulu, just as Prey was set to do and did later in 2022. Asbell said that by aiming for the streaming platform, there wouldn't be the pressure to whittle down the potential edginess that could come with theatrical considerations. Quote, "It's not a film that has to be all things to all people with those gargantuan budgets. They get to be authentically what they are, and this is closer to its genre roots." So I've read in numerous online sources that the film was switched to theatrical release because Fox executives were just that impressed with the production itself. It was announced that it would switch to a theatrical release on June 15th, 2023, which was right in the middle of filming. So if this is true, they were blown away by essentially the dailies. We don't call them that anymore, but essentially what we used to call the dailies, basically the rough and incomplete footage that was coming in from the set as they were filming. So production began in Budapest, Hungary on March 9th, 2023, and lasted until July 3rd, my birthday. I was celebrating the wrap of this production, and I didn't even know it. And the production spend in Hungary, the only location the film shot at, is on record as $40 million. Now, this does not account for post-production costs, and most of the above-the-line fees, so the director, the producers, there was no producer fee over $3 million that could count towards the spend, and only 50% of non-Hungarian cast and crew could count towards the spend.
Wow.
So this likely makes the total budget of Alien Romulus between 70 and 90 million. And to put that in perspective, Alien Covenant was 111 million. Yeah. So on the high end, it's not too far from Alien Covenant, but on the low end, that's roughly a third less than what Alien Covenant spent, if it is closer to the 70 million mark. They have not released full budget details. This is just the guesstimate from the production tax credit costs, which have been posted. And that is the history. Then the movie was released, and here we are today. So first off, I like to start with, we're going to start with you, Bryant. What is your personal history with Aliens? You're a super fan. We just heard that. So you are a super fan. Yes. And so you've seen everything. And when you were coming into this movie, like, what were your expectations? What were your thoughts before seeing it?
Well, my history is as I said, pretty intense. It's Alien movies. The franchise actually got me into comic books, which is, as you mentioned earlier, what I do with my life now. And so I have a deep affinity for this universe in every aspect of it. You know, the comics, there's novels, there's video games, lots of mythology if you want to go that far. But kind of like Star Wars, that mythology has changed from time to time. Creators have come back to the franchise and done things that the audience have had trouble swallowing. There's been debates between what the fans like and what the filmmakers like. And so I think that honestly, in some ways, my expectations for Prometheus and what I went through going through with those films kind of lowered my expectations for Romulus, you know? At this point, I'm just looking for another fun alien story, something that I can grab onto. And I've found something interesting with each Alien film that I've found it worth, you know, revisiting from time to time. I have ones that I like better than others. Yeah. But this one's interesting. This is a really interesting film. And I was glad that I was glad that I could go in with I guess, you know, an easy way to relate to it is a similar place that I think we compare this to Prey, you know, like where the Predator franchise was, what I wanted. And in many ways, I've talked to a few fans who I enjoy their opinions. And one thing that I've heard a few times that I heard with Prey at the same time is it feels like what us really intense fans knew existed because of the comic book universe. It feels like a comic book storyline that has been done now cinematically. And so that kind of like what Dallas was saying, I'm very excited about what it means for the future, because I do think even if you don't love everything about this film, it sets the franchise in a nice place to continue.
Mm-hmm. It euthanizes it. YOUTH. Sure. Euthanizes it. But yeah, you're right. I think there's something about these. I'll call it a one-off. I mean, it definitely is positioned in between two IP, and you know, because of that, it kind of lives in its own little vacuum. So it's its own little perfectly formed narrative, which you don't need to, expand upon any further. Like it is what it is, and it's like you said, it feels like almost a comic book narrative brought to life for the big screen, and that alone allows you to kind of just live in the moment and not have these sort of franchise tentpole kind of expectations. And because of that, it was very enjoyable. Had this been produced and released as, the great big, a great big sort of Alien installment, I would have been sorely disappointed, of course. But, as its own little, sort of vacuum, in its own little sort of vacuum, it's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. And for me, I'm assuming that both of you, I know you, Bryant, you've seen it all. You've seen everything in this franchise. Dallas, I think you've seen Prometheus and Alien Covenant before, correct? Yeah. So I'm the only asshole that didn't. And I'm coming into this with, I've seen the original 4, the original quote unquote quadrilogy, right? And I rewatched all of those not too long ago. It wasn't even in preparation for this. I just kind of rewatched them not too long ago, like last year or something like that. And a couple of things had changed that were interesting to me. One, I finally liked the first Alien more than James Cameron's Aliens for the first time in my life.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'd finally switched over, which isn't to say that like the James Cameron one was like went way down or anything like that, but by a hair that it was beating it, they just switched places. And I was like, nope, the OG Alien is now the one that I'm all about. And James Cameron's is like, well, that's a really well done action version of that. Okay, cool. But I was getting more out of the original.
Cameron's version is a great elevation of that first premise, I suppose. The first film is just sort of a phenomenal launch and seed and baseline, and the narrative's great. Just everything about that film is just delicious.
Right. I think intensification, because elevation in art always kind of suggests it gets brainier, and I think that's the first one. Yeah, it's more elevated. Right? That's the word we use for that. So I'm just going to throw that out there.
Idiots use that word to mean brainy.
I don't think Dallas meant it got brainier, because it definitely did not. Going into the Cameron one. I mean, not that it's a just dumb movie, but it is, the cerebral one is still, I mean, Ridley is one of, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, it's interesting that you say that, because I have not thought of that. The way that I think of it, but it matches what you're saying, is I think that Ridley really, if we have Cameron and Ridley as the parents of the Alien franchise, Ridley brought what you're saying, Dave, he brought a sort of a intelligence or a concept to it that was elevated to begin with. It had this European comic kind of.
He was making 2001, but with an alien,
right?
Alien monster. Yeah.
But Cameron brings something that also I think we don't realize is missing, which is like this heart, and he is essentially what makes Ripley the character that everyone thinks of her as.
Right. He makes excellent cinema. And I think what that ends up being is sort of these archetypes that just sing for the audience. So that's the reason I think Avatar resonates so much, is because it isn't necessarily all that deep, but the archetypes are just these sort of they're sort of almost romantic in a way. They're novelizations, for lack of a better term, cinematic novelizations, and that's what I think what Cameron does well. And to your point, Dave, what the other guy whose name I'm blanking on for some reason.
Ridley Scott.
Thank you, Jesus Christ. Ridley, if you're listening, he's not dead, is he? He's not dead, is he?
No, he's still kicking around.
All right. Oops. Yep. Hi, Ridley. Anyway,
he produced this, not just a name.
That's right. I was like, that's supposed to be a legacy produced. No, anyway.
But when he saw the final cut, he's on record as being like, he heaved a sigh of relief when he saw the final cut of this movie, because he was like, oh, thank God, someone else can still come on. We're going to talk about that though, because the Alien franchise was all about other people coming on.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah. But go ahead, finish that thought.
No, that was it. I forgot what I was going to say.
I was going to say the only thing I keep quibbling on word choice, but I do think that even with Ridley, I even want to give Ridley more, like Ridley is more of the cinematic director between him and James Cameron, but he is cinematic to a fault. Ridley is pure visual. He's about the cinematic quality, whereas, like you said, I think I liked your version at the end there where he was like, it's a novelization on screen, whereas Cameron is a storyteller.
Yeah.
And I've listened to a lot of anecdotes about how bloody fast he writes. And that when he wants to go fast, like it's usually the technology that's slowing him down.
Exactly.
Spending forever on. But when he writes a script, he can like pump it out in 10 days and it's, Terminator 2.
Right.
It's like a masterpiece of genre storytelling. And you're like, WTF? How? So it's like he's very good at that. It's a natural talent.
That's right. He's a genre god. He is truly a genre god, and I think that's why
Ridley,
his films sting so much. Yeah,
you're right. And Ridley, I think, could give two shits less about genre in specific. Like he's just like, I want to make a pretty film, kind of a thing almost. But it's like he has very concrete ideas of how it's visually meant to be, which is why I said 2001. He's almost Kubrickian in that way, where he's just like, I want the experience to be something. It's not about a character or a story per se, except how that enhances the experience as a thing that's just going to hit you, which is why his movies can hit you and almost make no sense, or you're not sure what to think about them. Even though they have made an impact, you're still just kind of like, the credits roll and you're like, I don't know how I feel. Yeah. Like it was something, I just don't know what that is. He can be very opaque in that way with what he does. But it's interesting because Aliens as a franchise, one of the reasons I didn't see Prometheus and Alien Covenant is I loved the idea back in the day that every Alien movie was meant to be a brand new director, that it was meant to be a new vision, and especially they were usually up and coming directors. Yeah. So, which Fede more or less fits the bill. He's a little further along than where Fincher and Genet was back in the day, but he's still not like he hasn't made a Dune movie, right? He hasn't broken big in that way yet. So,
is that the bar? Dune's the bar.
I mean, kind of. If you're coming from a little more like indie, smaller budget genre fare, like an Evil Dead remake, it is a remake, but it's a remake of one of the scrappiest, indiest films of like all time. You're making it bigger budget is not a high bar, right? It's like, give it some money, and it's a big budget. It's a big budget by comparison. But now it's interesting, Bryant, when you suggested your short list of things that we could discuss today, and I texted it all to Dallas, and he just came back pretty much instantly and was like, Romulus.
Yeah, 100%.
And I was like, why? And it was weird because I hadn't, I'd been so off the Alien train for so long that I was like, I kind of wanted to do Alien Theory. So I was sort of like, I'm like, I want to do that. And he's like, Romulus. And I'm like, but okay, just out of curiosity, why? And he was like, I love this director. I love what he's done in the past. I've really appreciated it. And so I looked up this director and realized, I'd never seen anything he'd done. I hadn't seen Don't Breathe. I hadn't seen the Evil Dead remake. I had basically poo-pooed it. Well, I mean, not poo-pooed in terms of like I thought it was bad, but like I didn't need to see an Evil Dead remake. I was really hesitant about that. And then Don't Breathe was something I was interested in, but it was on the never-ending Netflix streaming list kind of a thing where it was just on the list for forever. So I did watch the Evil Dead remake in preparation for coming into this to kind of see what it was. And he really is the kind of director that, what he brought to the Evil Dead remake, he's good at homages and giving a hint of that spirit, but I mean, he is also very visual like Ridley. I can kind of see why they got along. Because he knows how to make an image, and he knows how to make a sequence of images that are incredibly intense and incredibly jaw-dropping and kind of eye-popping in their way, and gets you on that edge of the seat. Like even Evil Dead, I'm like, I know Evil Dead. And even that, I was like, this is pretty creepy.
Precisely.
Like, this is actually getting me. Yeah.
And here to your point, I think what makes him so interesting as an auteur, as a director, as a writer, as a sort of visualizer of tale, I suppose, is that he takes something like Evil Dead or Alien that is, we know exactly what those tales are, those worlds are. Evil Dead is at its core humorous. At its core, it's hilarious. And with a lot of horror, imbued within it. But what he does with Evil Dead is almost flips the equation, where it is.
He did a completely serious Evil Dead, which was
delicious and still so satisfying, but still also pays homage to that original IP, which we all have some sort of connection to.
Right.
And I think when you find a director who's able to do that thing, because it is really difficult, and do it well, that is someone I need to see more of. And to your point, when Evil Dead was first announced, I had absolutely no desire to see it, but I saw it on a lark, and Act 3 of that film blew me away. The way he raised the stakes and the turns, and I was like, oh. So instead of using comedy and humor here, he's just raising the sort of terror stakes as the turn, as the sort of the engine, I suppose, and that's what sold me.
Interesting. Bryant, have you seen other Fede Alvarez films in the past, and what are you bringing to this table, knowing he was directing this? Like, how are you coming in that way?
I have not seen other films. I guess I just tended to turn away, sort of like what you mentioned there, Dave. I'm not the biggest Evil Dead fan. I don't hate it, but it was something where I was like, I've seen the originals. I don't feel a need to necessarily see the remake. I might now, because I've heard so many people say, great things about it.
Right.
But I was pretty fresh. I was worried a little bit about Alvarez because I don't know if I still might not love this, but I didn't love the idea about hiring a horror director for an Alien film. It felt kind of unnecessary.
Against the grain of how how the franchise had gone up to this point. Yeah.
Right. We definitely want people to be able to bring that element to it, but it wasn't like I never thought of these as specifically horror films. Yeah. They have horrific elements in them, but they're not they're not that kind of they're not as genre. They're not part of that the same way that I think of it.
Right.
Think of something like Evil Dead, Scream, whatever. I guess there is always a blend, but I was a little cautious of that. And then the more I heard interviews with Alvarez, the more I was slowly turned. The trailers did a good deal too. The trailers I thought were really well cut. They seemed to take the subject matter seriously. It matched visually kind of what we were doing. Ultimately, I will say this, there's a lot that I want to give him a lot of credit, because I think he did really well with this film. There are elements of this film that I do not like, or I
okay. Let's stop there. Go. Okay. What's number one?
Hold on. Finish the thought.
I have a list. Sorry, go on.
Okay, we'll get there. Hold on, Dal.
All right. I know. Go, Bryant.
Hold on.
Continue, Bryant. Go. Continue, Bryant.
Well, I'll just dip my toe in that, and that's essentially one thing that I don't know if it came from him and his writing partner, or if it came from the studio, or if it came from Ridley Scott. Is there are a lot of winks at the audience in this film, especially to previous films, and that feels really, really against the grain with the Alien films. The Alien films, people don't say lines because the audience knows the line. They might say it because a character knows that, or it has meaning. Yeah. But there were times in here where I felt like, oh, this feels shoved in here because. The audience is supposed to go,
it was the first fan service Alien movie ever. Right. It really was. Yeah.
And sometimes that works really well for horror movies. Not every single one, but I know, for example, Wes Craven would play that stuff up really well in his films, and it was part of the experience, screaming back at the screen and stuff. Yeah, it didn't sit exactly well with me on some of this, but it's minor stuff in the sense that there's a little too much of it in the film for me, but it's not the core of the film. So I'm able to look past it to some degree,
No.
Yeah. Even the trailer had some of the moments in there, to get you, even that classic Alien 3 thing where the alien is right there and she's backing off, like this, and it's right there by her face. And it's okay. I mean, I guess now the one callback I did like, and I actually think this movie, well, we'll get there in a minute. There is one callback that I think it took it and made it better than the original thing that it was riffing on. But all right, so Bryant, you also mentioned that you were all about the first half, but not so thrilled with the second half. Yes. You want to elaborate on that?
Sure. I would love to say that there's some sort of twin metaphor here, given Remus and Romulus. I don't know that is true.
Okay, sorry, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
We left the theater puzzling over. I mean, I had theories. Other people had theories. My part, it was just maybe part of the pitch was a Remus film to follow up with Romulus.
Romulus.
But yeah, hey, who knows?
Who knows? That's a good theory, honestly, because you were kind of like, why did we choose only one twin to focus on? This is a station that has two sections, two twins. What I liked, and I've seen most people on the opposite, where they feel like they like the second half a little bit more, but I've seen a few people that agree with me, and where I'm coming from is, for me, the first half was so interesting in the sense that it seemed to really dig into what does this corner of life look like in Weyland-Yutani? What is it like to be this kind of young person in this mining situation, to be crushed by this corporation, to have no hope?
It was a bit more Hunger Games, right? You're like dystopian society, and we're going to follow this and track this and focus more on this.
And I also found it really interesting the way they built relationships with the characters. This character used to date this character. This character has a prejudice against synthetics because of experiences in their past, or this synthetic who has grown up as a brother to a certain character, but is faulty, is losing it to a certain degree. So it emulates, so many different things. It could be a sibling that you have that has some sort of condition that you have to watch out for. It could. I saw people talking about the idea of what the synthetics speak to in regards to slavery in regards to this film. So I don't know. I found all that really interesting, original, and still fitting within the franchise that had been established. And I would say that the second half just kind of felt a little bit. I wanted it to have more thematic content than I think it did. It was more of a thrill ride, as you said before. It was a little bit greatest hits of like, hey, this was an alien, this was an aliens, this was an alien resurrection. It did it very well, but I just felt like it was a little more hollow than I wanted it to be. But again, like, it could have been horrible. It wasn't horrible, and I want to give it credit for what it was.
The second half felt
well made, right?
Yeah, very well made. Yeah.
The second half felt like the studio got deeply involved in wanting, with the edict, to give the audience more of what they recognize. I don't know how true that is or how much of that pressure was there, but at the second half just felt like, you were saying, Bryant, it was the greatest hits. Let's give them the benchmarks, the things they come to this IP for. So
the greatest hits part could have been the studio, and I have but then again, you don't know, because Fede, we are the generation now where we're like, and Fede's younger than us, I think. Where they're coming in as super fans. They're already coming in, and we didn't really have that before.
Yeah, they streamed all the films in a weekend. Yeah, for the first time.
Right. People knew about aliens, but people didn't grow up with aliens when they were directing them in the 90s, right? It's like they were already adults. So I think it is that thing about these franchises that have lived this long and continued, or that we're reaching back in, and even if it hasn't technically lived this long, like Beverly Hills Cop, we're bringing it back anyway, kind of a thing. So, but they are our childhood franchises. And that's, I think, kind of a new thing we're grappling with, is how do we make films that we have that kind of a connection to when we're the ones making them. When they're close childhood treasured franchises, not just something we enjoyed or thought, oh yeah, that is a really good movie. I got to follow up James Cameron shit, but outside of that, now it's like, it's the Alien franchise. And I do think filmmakers might err on the side of, again, those nods, that fanboy, that fan personness. But at the same time, the one thing I think is very Alvarez and not the studio is how, like, that second half, it has like a dozen fucking climaxes.
It does, yeah.
It does.
It's insane. I mean, it's so much. And I did get a sense of this in Evil Dead. Like, he kind of does it there too, but not as over, because there it's like, okay, there are like 4 climaxes. This one, I was like, mother of God, dude. Yeah. I'm like, this is like, stop, let it end. Let it end.
You know what's really interesting about that too is like what we were talking about. It's a horror movie convention to do that, where you're having like this sort of pulling the rug out over and over, but it's also something that's been established within the Alien franchise. It's kind of interesting because I don't have this issue with like Aliens, even though James Cameron is essentially doing the same ending,
right.
like suck
Yep.
the alien out into space, with Ripley.
And Resurrection did the same thing, right? So only Alien 3 bucked that trend.
So they do find ways to make it a little bit new. I think what felt weird in this part is because it was emulating certain things, like, here, I'm going to get into my night clothes. Here,
yeah, that's a good point.
We kind of knew what was coming, and I feel like if I don't know who is responsible, I feel like if Alvarez was pushed or given more credence to go like, hey, do your own thing. You don't have to ape what came before. It could still, because even, I'm going to spoil a little bit. They even do it in Covenant, Dave. It's we have an alien. We have to get him out in space.
Oh God, yeah, they
shoot
do
him out the airlock, and you're like,
right.
At some
you're
point,
like, come on, guys.
Right.
You got to think of something better.
Right. And it's like, you're the one who started it. Don't repeat yourself. Right.
Well, and this is in it's so weird because there's like this like duality to this film, because it seems to be present in Alvarez or his writing partner, because one sequence that has to be called out for being great is the idea of playing with the 0G to escape the acid.
That scene was inspired. That was a good one.
It was so cool, but it was also, what I loved about it is it also works to make that character played by Kaylee Spiney intelligent and smart and resourceful in the way that Ripley is, and so often that gets left on the floor. It's just like people think Ripley is or a character just like tough. That is just put a gun in her hands and then that's her. It's like, no, you need to make me like this character because she knows what she's doing, and she may be smarter than me as the audience member, and I think there was some inspired moments there. I just wish that it pushed all the way through.
Yeah, agreed.
Yes. I will say the 0G, the only thing that bugged me about the 0G thing is I'm like, there's no chance in hell you're swimming through that and not getting a picture on something. Yeah. Like, I'm like, nice try. I'm like, this is clever and this is beautiful to look at. Don't get me wrong. But that's
the movie magic moment there.
Right. Yes. And I think I'm a little old school in my thrills, and we probably all are here on this podcast, but I'm a little old school in that, like, I'm such an old school diehard John McClane style where it's like a main protagonist of a action thriller gets like 3 major skin of their teeth survival moments.
Not 12.
And that, not 12, where it's like that I'm okay with, but it's got to be a choice few, like those ones where you're just like, whoa, like they just made it and that's amazing. And of course that wouldn't happen in real life, but if you only do it sparingly, it's okay. But this movie, like the second half of this movie, as much as I admire it, and I think I kind of admire it just because it leans in so heavily to the absurd action heroine element of and action heroes, because she's not the only one in this final half, but just that skin of their teeth, so many close calls followed by another immediate super close call where you're just like, okay, good. It's very inventive, it's very creative, but I was like, by the final moments of this film, I was more just, I had a big smile on my face, but more of just like,
silly.
This thing is fucking absurd.
Yeah,
a little numb by that time. Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. I will say, my partner brought up a good point. He's like, this is the only Alien film in which the grabbers come off that fucking easily. In which you can get rid of a grabber just by basically flinging it away. Right. Like, come on, bro.
Right.
Like, these are grabbers.
I guess we've never seen I'm trying to think if we've seen an android versus facehuggers, but it did seem like there are elements like of this film where I'm like, it does feel a little less smart than some of the other films. And like another element of like some sort of like that is like, I don't have a good explanation for why they can just fly their spaceship off of the mining planet and go to an abandoned.
Right.
Like if the government,
they're not allowed to leave the planet. Right. I mean, maybe it's a spaceship where they're like, this spaceship can't get you anywhere. Like it can get you to orbit. But it's like, where are you going? You can't fly to another planet.
But my favorite,
really give a shit.
My favorite part is, and again, I kind of fell asleep in the first 10 minutes. I was really annoyed at that. For some reason, I was just like, oh, fine. But then I woke up. But I distinctly remember them being surprised that it wasn't just a spaceship that they found.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, huh. So you have the technology to get there, but not the technology to discern that it's not just a spaceship. Okay, we'll go with that.
Well, we don't really know. Like, I guess, like I've kind of come around to the idea of like as a young teenager, I was like, oh, the company is this evil empire.
Yeah.
They know what they're doing. Everyone's in on the conspiracy.
Right.
I now very much like look at it with adult
They're very
eyes.
incompetent.
They're incredibly incompetent. Just a mass conglomerate of people backstabbing each other to like eat in better cafeterias.
Yeah. They're an Elon company, right? They're like yes, they did. They climbed to power with some genius once upon a time, and have held on to it tooth and claw.
But then their idiocy begins to show. Yeah.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. Like, so one of the themes of this movie too is that, you know, and let's actually talk briefly so I can mention this theme, the connection to Prometheus and Covenant, which I know of because I looked it up. And so it's like, I know there's a connection there, but there is a connection, guys. And so you two who have seen those movies, did this make sense? Like, I mean, it makes sense to me because I don't know any better. And I'm like, sure, like all of that, like, let's go with it. Does this connect in a way that that gels with your takes on Prometheus and Covenant or not? Interesting. Maybe not really. Huh?
I think it's loose tissue. I think it's very loose.
Yes, tissue.
Tissue.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead, Bryant.
No, you're exactly right. I think Prometheus and Covenant are. There's open interpretations to some degree of many aspects of those films, and
this tries to put a definition on something.
Well, I've read Ridley Scott's opinions, you know, and so what he it's kind of like looking at the prequels versus the Star Wars prequels versus looking at what George Lucas says about them, and at times you're like, oh, I get what you're trying to do here, and you know you can think of it that way, or you can think about the way the audience interpreted it, and what I think with Romulus is that it's interesting in the sense it doesn't really advance much, but it's interesting in the sense that it kind of gives us an idea, at least what Ridley Scott wants us to believe, that the company wanted from the alien.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And what I found really interesting about this is such a small point, but I don't know why I'm so interested in this. I liked the idea that the special order was like null and void now. The special order that Ash is following to get the xenomorph. No one, we encounter, you know, the company now being like, who cares? We've got the injection. We got the substance out. Screw the alien. Now it's like this like bother this. Oh God, it's killed some people. Can someone just get rid of the alien? Like, you know,
right. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I think it's just very flimsy tissue, connective tissue for me.
Interesting. And
maybe in the original pitches, it was much denser and much more sort of fleshed out. But yeah, I mean, they exist in the same world, and there's some carryover. But
okay. You know, the thing that I took away from it, having not seen those two movies, so it fits with the theme that. And to Brian's point of the company being largely incompetent, is, you know, even from the first Alien movie, where the alien might be good for like weaponizing or something, like or survival, like they want to study this alien can they replicate it? Can they turn it into a weapon? Whatever it is, the company kind of doesn't know, but they want to find out what they can do with it. And as these movies have gone on, you know, this connective tissue here is another thing where the company's like, it would rather, and you know, Dallas, we talked about this. We just did a episode on the 3-body problem, and we were talking about losing faith in humanity. And the company is basically like, yeah, humans aren't going to evolve fast enough for our purposes. They're not going to get to where we need them to go. So we're going to do this other crazy. So they keep trying to take shortcuts via the alien for whatever it is they want to do, no matter what the movie is. It's always this company trying to mine the resource of the alien itself. of whatever that might be, and fucking everything up in over and over and over again. They can't really do it, and instead of, because the other thing about the company that is a theme of these movies, they're a very dystopian style company. We don't really know what they're mining or why, really, right?
No clue.
It's like it's always just some resource. And what does that resource do for them? Why do they need more of it? We don't really know. No one ever really goes into that. And there's that element, I think, to that not knowing, where in the same way billionaires today are still obsessed with making more money, even though they're billionaires. But losing money is still losing face, and they're not going to do that. They still need to make more. They're still strip mining whatever economic resources there are to make more money, even though it's absurd for them to think they ever need more, like literally ever, but they're willing to do it on the backs of all the other living human beings just to make yet more money. And the company seems to be one of those organizations where even these people on this planet that never get to see the sun, never get to leave, they're like, there's still resources on this planet. We'd like it faster, please. Don't let anyone go on the old terms of the contract. We're going to change the contract now. It's just all they do is strip mine, but it seems to be kind of mindless. Even if this alien could give them better workers, even if it was a weapon back in the day. Here's the other thing. Back in the original Alien, what did they need a weapon for? To weaponize against whom?
Other companies.
We never know. There's never a story as to why they need
Walmart.
this shit. Yes. It's like, what are these even about? And even in Aliens, when we get to see the Earth a little bit, they don't really go into that. It's like the company is always just wanting things, and things that you would want as a company or an organization today in the modern world, but never to any end, really. Anyway, go ahead.
Speaking of the concept of birth, they really leaned into the vaginal imagery of this guy. They really leaned deeply into the vaginal imagery. With no lead up, no soft onboarding. It was just like, nope, vagina done. Here's alien baby. It was there's
a lot. Part of that is, I feel like, is really admirable in the sense of like, all right, I mean, I guess you're not afraid of some male audience members and male directors get really icky about these films. They can't deal with the idea of like, oh, something's going down my throat, I'm getting impregnated. It really reverses or reveals a lot of gender issues. But it does feel, again, like it feels like this weird thing where it's like someone wanted to be like H.R. Giger, but they don't quite have the sense of the artistry, if you will.
You know what I think it was. This is my theory. I think it was an overt nod to the feminism of the first two films, and it not being done delicately or artistically, rather just overtly and intentionally. And it may be in other cuts it was a little softer onboarding, maybe it was a little more romantic, but it was just here's your feminist imagery. And what's crazy is that's kind of the feminist imagery a male director might give you.
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
So
I do remember there's a classic story of the original Alien where Giger had painted vaginal openings to the eggs, and Ridley Scott was just like, "We're never going to get away with that. Like, we have to do a flower of some sort."
That's right.
To wrap us up here, what do you hope, ideally, like for the next Alien movie? Are you, Bryant? I'm assuming. Are you hoping for just something different for the next Alien movie?
I am. I want them to take a big swing. I think that if we look at specifically where I come from, which is the comic book world, there is very much like we look at the MCU or Star Wars. There's so many story points that could be reimagined or rewritten or just are amazing the way they are, that are outside the box of an alien in a space station or alien in a ship, that really look at the world or what the creature means. I mean, I wish that they would take a really bold direction and kind of say, hey, what is a different type of alien story? What is that going to be?
Yeah, agreed.
Dallas, any other thoughts on that?
Same thing. I think, unlike any other franchise, it does two things. It gives you a horror icon that is just kind of boundless. It really is. That icon is just boundless. And it also gives you just this kind of, space narrative, which is just endless. And it marries these two things. And the potential is so great. And I get annoyed that they keep kind of sticking to the same framework, even though it works and it's so satisfying. And it's kind of, it's created its own genre. And truly, it's kind of created its own genre.
Sure.
And I just want to see them take a big swing and go someplace fully unexpected, because they can now.
Right.
They absolutely can. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think the only thing I'd add to that is, now that we're going to, if we do make them more frequently, because that's one of the big things, is that those huge gaps after the first four, where then we always feel compelled to rehash stuff and reestablish all over again. And it's like, look, okay, reestablish as you need. Maybe give Ridley his Aliens Awakening. If you let him wrap it up, and then we can do with whatever he leaves us with there. It is
let someone else
from what
write
I've heard.
Yeah, please let someone else.
There you go.
Good
Please.
God.
Yeah, Ridley is not a script guy. I mean, he's almost as bad as Lucas on that front, where you're like, please God, let someone else write it, and then let this guy have the vision. That's fine. Even if he comes up with the plot, great. Do not let him script it. But yeah, I think I'm hoping for either smaller scale, and now that if we make them a little quicker, and then smaller scale. So like, pump them out a little, some for Hulu, some for streaming, maybe only some for theatrical. And between the two, go faster, be more daring with your directors. Don't make the Marvel mistake where everyone with a unique take on the house style you keep breaking up with, because and then the few times they didn't break up with them, we actually evolved the Marvel Cinematic Universe, like James Gunn and like Taika Waititi and things like that. Even Edgar Wright gave an influence, even though he walked away eventually. But it's like, let some people with some good visions. The one preview that I saw in the theater that I was taken aback by how much I kind of liked the preview, was the Joker sequel.
Same.
Yeah, I haven't seen the first one.
I wasn't a big fan of the first.
It's dumb Taxi Driver. That's what it is.
It is Taxi Driver with makeup.
Interesting.
but the sequel does look compelling. Yeah, it does look compelling.
It does. And I was like, shit, that was unexpected. But it is that thing of like, because this is Scorsese, right? I believe, right? The two Jokers are both, are they directed by Scorsese?
No. They're just
Phillips. Todd Phillips. Yeah. They're produced by Scorsese. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. But taking someone like Todd Phillips to do and these are not the Joker movies you would expect Todd Phillips to make, right? They are different, but allowing a creator like that to take those swings.
Sure.
The first one, not everyone's cup of tea, apparently. I still haven't seen it. But this one now, I'm like, I might have to see the first one just to be ready for this one, because now I'm interested, because this is interesting. Yeah. And to Brian's point, that is what's going to have legs. That's what's going to, for the long tail of all of this, for like interest to remain, and not just have this be your bargain bin. We can license it out to Netflix because we don't care that we have it in our catalog that much anymore, kind of a thing. Like, let it be more than just the moment to make the box office, and make your movies that are that as well, but then also leave room for these, because they're your legacy at the end of the day.
All right, one final note here, question for you, Bryant, and you, Dave. I believe that no great film, when it was made, great film that's been made, should be remade. I believe that bad films should be remade. What is a shitty or bad film from the past that you would love to remake, and remake well?
Oh, that's a hard one. Let me think of a bad film.
Yeah.
You know what? I might already have mine, because I already mentioned it. I am not a fan of Alien vs Predator, and it deserves to be.
It can be made so much better.
Oh, I'm sure.
It deserves to be a huge film. Yeah.
The potential has not been mined on that concept. Like, that is a fact.
And well, I think we can see that with Predator as well. There's so much with these where you're like, you could dive into Predator culture and get into what
absolutely.
the xenomorph means and what it represents, and it can be more than like a Saturday morning popcorn movie.
Yeah.
It can have some significance that is interesting and cool.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mentioned this as well, Dallas. So I'm going to say it's Southland Tales.
Yeah, you know what? I remember when that came out. We had a long discussion, actually a 3-hour-long fucking discussion about that film. I know. And good point.
I admire what he was going for, but it is such an atrocious mess that I'm like, there's so much that can be mined from that, and like, okay, let's like. It was one of those auteurish projects where he was coming off of Donnie Darko. I think he was feeling very confident in his skills.
Yeah.
And he just did not, he could not rein himself in to control this massive, unwieldy thing that he tried for, and the different tones that he did not have a good grip on in terms of the tonal whiplash. And I was just like, these are not your strengths, dude. I don't know why you're doing this. But there's so much good stuff in terms of the ambition in that movie. I would love for him, whether him or someone else, I'm going to say someone else, but even if he's like, look, I've learned a lot. I'm going to come back to this. And because even he says, he's like, that there is a making of that movie. The making of that movie is a fascinating story. There was a lot of concessions that were made along the way. Then he spun out the graphic novels. The graphic novels actually were part of the movie that were cut. Mm-hmm. And then he tried to put them in there. And then it just became this unwieldy multi-part like spin off, but none of it still didn't really work. Like by the time all these pieces were done, the pieces didn't make any sense, and trying to weave them together was almost an impossible mental exercise. Like it just got away from him because of how much he had to rein in the budget and rein in the time. And because I think his first cut of this movie is one of those absurd things where it was like, almost 5 hours long or some shit like that. And it was just like, by the time they had it even down to like 2.5, he was like, this is half the story. I don't. And he could not see the forest for the trees of like what half of the story actually would make sense as a movie that you just put out there. And so I would love to give it another try. Yeah.
All right,
guys. Well, to wrap this up, let's shout out the drinks once again for Alien Romulus. I say Uruguayan Tannat to honor the filmmakers for their Uruguayan background and to match that intensity. Dallas.
We've got the Klein Draken. That's the Klein Draken Pinotage 2022. South African. You can find this for about $20 a bottle.
Yep. Fun fact: my Tannat is about 20. I think it's $19.99 a bottle. So there you go, both in the $20 range. Not going to break anyone's bank. That's and right. Bryant, your low carb,
hold it up. Monster energy drink. It'll hype you up. It'll probably hurt you a little.
Yeah,
fits with the movie.
Totally worth it.
Gorgeous. And Bryant, where can people find you online, and shout out what you've got going on one last time for everybody?
Okay, you can find me online. I'm on Twitter at Comic Book Slayer. I'm on Instagram at Comic Book Sniffer. If you want more alien opinions, definitely follow me there. For Fanbase Press, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. So please look for us. And just a reminder, we we're in the pre-launch stage for our first Kickstarter right now. It's as Dave noted, it's called Ripple Effects. We've already released this story. It was nominated for an Eisner and a Harvey, which are two of the top awards in the comic book industry. But we're doing a deluxe hardcover edition. It has a number of fantastic extras, including a new intro by Gail Simone. Yeah. And this is a story that looks at superhero origins through the lens of, or rather looks through invisible illnesses through the lens of a superhero origin. So if you can imagine a character like Superman, where his greatest asset is his body, but his body also is its own kryptonite. That is the kind of thing we're dealing with. And just a really fascinating look and an evolution, I think, of the superhero genre. We've seen so many superhero tales. This is the next evolution, if you will. So
it's a fresh take.
Definitely check it out. Yeah. You can click on the pre-link page right now, and you'll get notified when our campaign goes live.
Right.
It'll be live later in September.
Okay.
Beautiful. And we will have the pre-link page link down below in the description of this episode, which turns into the actual campaign page where the campaign is going on. So it's the same link whenever you're seeing this. Click on it. Even if you're listening to this like a year from now, I don't know why, but if you are, then you're going back through our archives. You're like, I love this show. Let's go back and see what they talked about in the past. You can click on that link and it will still take you to the completed campaign page. And if there are extra copies or the group to follow for future campaigns or what have you, worst case scenario, all things being equal, fanbasepress.com is where you can find everything. So just go there and find what you like. All right. Thank you so much, Bryant. It was lovely talking to you about Alien Romulus.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a fantastic time. Really enjoyed being here.
Of course, man.
All right. Beautiful. Everyone else, take care. We will be back in 1 week with another Wine and Comics pairing. Wine and Comics, not just comics. It can be other thing. That's our old show. With another wine and entertainment pairing for your entertainment. Ciao for now, folks. See you next week.
Night, guys.